My name is Sarah. I am 36 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and until about 14 months ago, I genuinely believed I had the kind of marriage other women envied. Not in a smug way, not in a posting couple photos every weekend way, just quietly, privately, in that deep part of you that feels settled, that feels safe. I thought I had found my person. His name is Mark David Calloway. He was 38 when everything fell apart. He is tall, with dark hair going slightly gray at the temples in that way that makes men look distinguished instead of old. He has this laugh that comes from the stomach, loud and sudden, the kind that fills a room. When I met him at a mutual friend's birthday party 9 years ago, he was the kind of man who made you feel like you were the only person in the room when he talked to you. Turns out that was a skill, not a feeling, a skill he had practiced on a lot of people. We dated for 2 years, got married in 2017 at a small vineyard outside of Columbus, 30 people. My dress was ivory, not white, because I had always thought pure white washed me out, and Mark said I should wear whatever made me feel beautiful. Little things like that. That is what made me think he was different. He paid attention to details other men missed. We bought a house in Westerville in 2019, 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a neighborhood with sidewalks where kids rode bikes in the evenings. We talked about filling those extra bedrooms eventually. We were not in a rush. We had time. Mark worked in sales for a medical device company. It was a good job, the kind with a company car and an expense account and a lot of travel. He would fly to Chicago, Denver, Atlanta, sometimes out to the West Coast for conferences. I was used to him being gone. I worked from home as a medical billing specialist, so our schedules had always been flexible and mismatched in ways we had learned to work around. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I was not naive. I was not the kind of woman who walked through life with her eyes closed. I had seen bad relationships. My parents had one. My dad left when I was 11, and my mom spent the next decade pretending everything was fine while quietly falling apart. I swore I would never be her. I swore I would see the warning signs. I swore I would pay attention. I did not see the warning signs. Or maybe I saw them and explained them away so smoothly that I did not even realize I was doing it. That is the thing about denial. It does not feel like denial when you are in it. It feels like trust. It feels like giving your partner the benefit of the doubt. It feels like being a good wife. The business trips started becoming more frequent in early 2022. Before that, Mark traveled maybe once a month, sometimes twice. But starting around February of that year, it became every 2 or 3 weeks. 3 days here, 4 days there, sometimes a full week. I asked him about it once early on. He said the company had expanded into new territories and that his region had grown. He showed me an email on his laptop from his regional manager about increased quotas and territory assignments. I nodded and believed him completely, because why would I not? He was showing me an email. I did not know until much later that he had written that email himself from a fake account he had set up specifically for moments like that one, for moments when his wife asked questions he needed to answer without lying directly to her face. The changes were small enough that I kept finding reasons for them. He started sleeping with his phone face down on the nightstand. I told myself he was trying to use his phone less before bed because he had mentioned something about blue light affecting sleep. He started taking longer in the bathroom in the mornings. I figured he was listening to a podcast. He started being slightly more irritable on Sunday evenings before a trip. I thought it was work stress. There was one night in the 2022. We were having dinner, just the two of us, chicken parmesan that I had made from scratch because it was his favorite. He was distracted, barely talking, pushing his food around his plate. I asked if everything was okay. He looked up at me with this expression I did not recognize. Not sad, not guilty, just distant, like I was a person he was visiting instead of a person he came home to. He said, "Yeah, just tired, work stuff." And then he smiled, that familiar stomach laugh about something on television, and I told myself I had imagined the distance. I told myself I was being oversensitive. I was not being oversensitive. The first time I actually felt something was wrong, deeply wrong, was March of 2023. Mark had left for what he said was a 4-day trip to Cincinnati for a product launch event. He sent me a text when he landed and another that night saying the hotel was nice and the team dinner had gone well. On day 2, I was doing laundry. Nothing dramatic, just sorting clothes. I found a receipt in the pocket of his gray jacket. Not a hotel receipt, not a restaurant receipt. A grocery store receipt from a Kroger in Indianapolis. Diapers, baby formula, apple juice boxes, and a small birthday cake. Mark does not have children. We do not have children. I stood in our laundry room holding that receipt for a very long time. He was supposed to be in Cincinnati. The receipt was from Indianapolis, and someone, somewhere, had needed baby formula and a birthday cake. I folded the receipt and put it in my own pocket. I finished the laundry. I made dinner. I watched television. I went to bed, and I did not sleep at all. I want to tell you that I confronted him immediately, that I called him right then and demanded answers, that I was the kind of woman who does not let things slide. But I did not do any of that. I put the receipt in the back of my underwear drawer, under a stack of things I never wore, and I spent the next 3 weeks convincing myself there was an explanation. Maybe he had made a detour. Maybe he had stopped to pick up things for a colleague who had just had a baby. Maybe the receipt was old and had just been sitting in that pocket for months. Maybe. My brain is very creative when it needs to protect itself. But the thing about doubt is that once it is planted, it does not leave. It just waits. It waits while you make breakfast and go through your workday and watch television with your husband in the evenings. It sits in the corner of your mind, quiet and patient, until it has enough evidence to grow louder. The second thing was a phone call. The end of March. Mark had been home for a week and was getting ready for another trip, this time to Pittsburgh, he said. He was in the backyard taking a work call while I was in the kitchen. The kitchen window was open. It was one of those early spring days that suddenly feels warm enough to let air inside. I was rinsing dishes when I heard his voice change. Not what he said. I could not make out the words clearly. But the tone, the way a person's voice drops half a register when they are talking to someone they love. I know that tone. He used to use it with me. I did not go outside. I did not press my face to the window. I just stood at the sink, letting the water run, listening to that sound. When he came back inside, he said it had been his manager, something about quarterly numbers. He had his regular voice back. The work voice, efficient, slightly tired. I nodded and said dinner in 20 minutes. That night, after he fell asleep, I picked up his phone from the nightstand. He had started using a 6-digit passcode instead of the 4-digit one I had known for years. I tried his mother's birthday. Wrong. I tried our wedding anniversary. Wrong. I tried his college graduation year. Wrong. I put the phone down and lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. A locked phone from a man you have been married to for 6 years. I knew what that meant. I just did not want to know it. I called my friend Dana the next afternoon. Dana is the tells you the truth even when it is the last thing you want to hear. I told her about the receipt, about the phone, about the changed tone of his voice. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sarah, you already know. You are just waiting to be certain enough to act on it." She was right. I contacted a private investigator named Ray, who came recommended through a Facebook group for women going through marital problems. I felt ridiculous calling him. I felt like I was in a movie, one of those Lifetime movies where the woman is always the last to know. But I called him anyway. Ray was professional and quiet and did not make me feel small for being there. He said he would need Mark's travel schedule, his vehicle information, and a few weeks. I gave him everything. The first week came back normal. Mark was where he said he was, in Pittsburgh, meeting with hospital systems. I almost called Ray and canceled everything, almost let myself believe I had imagined it all. The second week changed everything. Mark told me he was going to Cleveland for 5 days. A major conference, he said. He would be back Friday. Ray followed him to a neighborhood in Indianapolis. Not a hotel, not a conference center, a residential neighborhood with tree-lined streets and front porches. A blue craftsman house with a red front door and a small bicycle in the driveway. Ray sent me photographs. Mark walking in through that red front door like it was his house, because it was. Mark in the backyard, sitting in a lawn chair while a woman I had never seen brought him a glass of something cold. A little girl, maybe 2 years old, toddling across the grass toward him, her arms out, the way small children run to their fathers. Mark picking her up, Mark laughing that stomach laugh. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at those photographs for a very long time. The woman's name, I would eventually learn, was Nicole. She was 31, a nurse practitioner. She had dark hair cut in a bob and wore Birkenstocks, and had a small garden in the backyard next to the lawn chairs. She was, by all visible evidence, a normal person, a good person even. A person who believed she was in a committed relationship with a man named Mark who traveled for work. The little girl's name was Lily. She had Mark's eyes and Nicole's smile, and absolutely no idea that her father had another life 2 hours away. I threw up in the kitchen sink. Then I washed my face. Then I called Ray and asked him to document everything and send me the full report. I needed to know everything before I said a word. I needed to be prepared, because Mark was coming home on Friday, and I had to decide what kind of woman I was going to be when he walked through our front door. Friday arrived the way terrible days always seem to arrive. Ordinary, sunny. The neighbors were mowing their lawn. Someone down the street was grilling. I had made lasagna because it is Mark's favorite, and I wanted everything to look completely normal when he walked in. I know that sounds strange, but I needed the advantage of surprise. I had spent years watching my mother react to painful things before she was ready, dissolving into tears and anger and receiving nothing in return except a man who knew he had won because she had shown her hand. I was not going to make that mistake. Mark came home at 6:30. He dropped his bag by the door, said he was exhausted, kissed me on the cheek. He smelled like hotel soap, or maybe like someone else's house. I could not tell the difference, and that thought alone nearly broke me. We sat down for dinner. He told me about the conference, about some new product the company was rolling out. He asked how my week had been. I said fine. I said work had been steady. I passed him the garlic bread. Halfway through dinner, I set down my fork. "How is Nicole?" I said. He stopped chewing. It was a very small pause, a fraction of a second, but I saw it. "Who?" he said. "Nicole." I kept my voice even. "The woman you have been living with in Indianapolis, the one with the red front door, and the little girl named Lily, through options, deciding which version of a lie might still work. I slid the folder across the table, Ray's photographs, dates, times, addresses, everything. Mark looked at the photographs for a long moment. When he looked back up at me, something in his face had shifted. The calculation was gone. What replaced it was not guilt exactly, it was exhaustion. Like a man who had been running for a very long time and could not run anymore. "How long?" I asked. "I need to know how long." He told me it had been almost 3 years. He had met Nicole at a conference in Indianapolis in 2020. It had started as something he told himself was temporary. Then Nicole got pregnant, and suddenly it was not temporary anymore. He had been trying, he said, to figure out how to end things, to make it right. He had never meant for it to go this far. I sat there listening to him explain himself, and I felt something very strange. Not the devastation I had expected, not the rage, just this hollow, ringing quiet, like the moment after a very loud noise when the world has not caught up yet. "You have a daughter," I said. "You have a 2-year-old daughter, and you never told me." He nodded. "Does Nicole know about me?" I asked. He shook his head. "She thinks I travel for work. She does not know I am married." So there were 3 people in this situation who had been lied to. Nicole, me, and a little girl who did not know her father lived a double life. I told Mark to go to the guest room. I told him I needed him out of my sight. He went. He did not argue. I sat at the kitchen table until almost midnight. Then I went upstairs, lay down in our bed, and stared at the ceiling. In the morning I called my sister, Diane. She drove 2 hours to be with me. She sat on my couch and held my hand, and did not tell me everything would be okay, because she is the kind of person who does not say things she cannot promise. She asked what I wanted to do. I said I did not know yet, but I knew what needed to happen first. Nicole needed to know. I want to be clear that this was not about revenge, or maybe it partially was, in a way that I am not ashamed to admit, but mostly it was because Nicole was a person who deserved the truth about her own life. She had a child with this man. She was making decisions based on a version of Mark that did not exist. She deserved to know who he actually was. I found her on Facebook. We had no mutual connections because we had no overlapping lives. She looked normal in her profile photos, happy, a birthday party picture with her daughter, a vacation photo somewhere with palm trees, a woman who thought she was living her real life. I sent her a message, short and direct. I told her who I was. I told her I was Mark's wife of 6 years. I told her I was not angry at her and that I believed she had no idea. I told her she deserved to know the truth and gave her my phone number. She called me 40 minutes later. The conversation was one of the hardest things I have ever done. She cried. She asked me to repeat things multiple times. She kept saying she did not understand. I told her everything calmly and clearly, and I did not let myself cry because I felt like she needed someone to be steady in that moment. She was the one who had just had the ground pulled out from under her while already holding a child in her arms. At the end of the call, she said, "I am so sorry this happened to you." I said, "I am sorry it happened to you too." We hung up, and I went downstairs and told Mark that Nicole now knew everything, and that he needed to figure out how he was going to be a present father to a daughter he had been hiding. And then I told him to find a place to stay, because he was not living in this house anymore. The weeks after Mark left were the kind of quiet that feels loud. Our house, which had always been full enough with just the two of us, became enormous. I would walk from room to room at night, unable to sleep and notice everything. The coffee mug he had left on the counter, his razor still in the bathroom, the 2 wine glasses we always used on weeknights still sitting in the drying rack. People keep asking me afterward if I was angry, and yes, I was. I am. But anger is not as simple as people think it is. It does not arrive all at once as a clean burning feeling. It arrives in layers, mixed with things you did not expect. Grief, mostly. Not for Mark exactly, but for the life I thought I had. For the version of myself who had believed she was loved. For 9 years of history that now felt like it had happened to a different person. My mother called when she found out. She was gentle about it, which surprised me, because gentleness had not always been her natural mode. She drove over and made soup and sat with me at the kitchen table. She did not say she had suspected. She did not say she had seen signs. She just said she was sorry and asked what I needed. I told her I needed to not be angry at myself for not seeing it. She said, "You trusted someone who was supposed to be trustworthy. That is not stupidity, that is marriage." I had always thought of my mother as someone I did not want to become. The woman who stayed too long, who explained away too much, who lost herself quietly while pretending everything was fine. But sitting across from her in that kitchen, I saw something different. I saw a woman who had survived, who had built a life after her own collapse, who was sitting here still whole, making soup. Mark and I did not have a dramatic second confrontation. He came to get his things on a Tuesday when I was at my sister's. He left his key on the counter. I did not want him in the house while I was there because I was not sure I could hold myself together, and I had decided early on that I was not going to fall apart in front of him. That was mine. My grief was mine, and I was not going to give it to him. Nicole and I did not stay in contact. I had not expected to. The call we shared was necessary, not the beginning of some strange friendship. She sent me one text a few weeks later, saying she had talked to a lawyer about child support and parenting arrangements. She said she hoped I was okay. I told her I hoped she was too. That was all. She had her life to rebuild. I had mine. The divorce process started in June. Mark did not contest anything. I think he was too ashamed, or maybe too tired from maintaining the parallel lives to have energy left for a fight. We had a house, some savings, and a shared life that had to be surgically divided. My lawyer was a woman named Patricia who had seen everything and was unimpressed by all of it. She was efficient and steady, and I trusted her completely. My friends rallied around me in the way that good people do, the ones who show up with food and with presents, and without an agenda. Dana, who had told me months earlier that I already knew, was there constantly. She would come over on Friday nights and we would watch terrible television, and she would make me laugh at things I had no business laughing at. My friend Tara took me hiking once a week. I had never been a big outdoors person, but there is something about moving your body through trees and air and silence that processes things your mind cannot. I would start every walk feeling tight and tangled and finish it feeling slightly less broken. Tara never forced conversation. She just walked next to me. What surprised me most was how functional I remained. I showed up to work, I answered emails, I made dinner most nights. I took out the garbage and watered the plants and did all the ordinary administrative tasks of a life I had expected to dissolve. I had expected to become someone who could not get out of bed. Instead, I just kept going. Not because I was strong in some impressive way, but because the alternative was stopping, and stopping felt like letting Mark have something else from me. My momentum, my forward motion, I was not giving him that too. The hardest part was not the betrayal itself. The hardest part was the reinterpretation. Going back through 9 years of memory and understanding that certain moments I had held as good were not what I thought. The anniversary trip to Portugal, the Christmas he surprised me with a weekend at a bed and breakfast. Were those guilt? Were those genuine? Were they both? I do not know. I will probably never know, and I have had to learn to sit with not knowing. My therapist, a woman named Dr. Okafor, who I started seeing in June, told me that our minds want to make a coherent story. We want to understand how we got from there to here, but sometimes there is no tidy explanation. Sometimes people contain contradictions. Sometimes the man who loved you also chose someone else, and the two truths can exist at the same time without canceling each other out. I did not find that comforting at first, but I have started to. The divorce was finalized in November, 8 months after that Friday dinner when I slid a folder across the table and watched Mark's face when he understood that it was over. I sold the Westerville house. I could not stay there. Too many layers of ordinary life pressed into the walls. I found an apartment closer to downtown, smaller, with big windows and a balcony where I put a small table and 2 chairs and a plant that I have somehow managed not to kill. I was starting to feel like myself again, not the same self, a different one. There is a version of this story that ends with me meeting someone wonderful 6 months later and discovering real love and riding off into some perfect new sunrise. That would be a satisfying ending. I understand why people want that ending. That is not my ending. At least not yet. But what I have instead is something I have decided is better than what I had, which is clarity. It is now 14 months since that Friday dinner. I am in my apartment with the big windows. I have the plant on the balcony that is still alive despite my lack of experience with plants, which feels like a small but real victory. I have a cat named Franklin who I adopted in January from a shelter and who has very strong opinions about where he is allowed to sit, which is everywhere. Mark is in Indianapolis. He moved there eventually. He is a presence in Lily's life in whatever way Nicole has allowed, and I do not know the details of that arrangement, and I have chosen not to know. He is not my problem anymore. That took a long time to feel true, but it does now. I am still in therapy with Dr. Okafor. We have done a lot of work on why I am good at noticing other people's discomfort and not good at noticing my own, on why I spent years learning to trust someone else's version of reality over my own instincts, on what it means to rebuild a self that is not organized around a partnership. I am not done with that work. I do not think I will be for a while, but I am not afraid of it anymore. I think about Nicole sometimes. I hope she is okay. I hope Lily is growing up surrounded by honesty and stability and people who show up for her consistently. Children deserve that. Whatever happened between the adults in that situation, Lily did not choose any of it, and she deserves better than the chaos of what her father created. I hope she gets it. Last month I had dinner with my mother, just the 2 of us at a restaurant she likes near her house. We talked for 3 hours, which is longer than we have talked in a single sitting in years. She told me about the early years of her marriage to my father, things she had never told me before, the doubts she had, the signs she had noticed and dismissed, the ways she had talked herself out of her own perception to keep the peace. I kept thinking if I was better, he would be better, she said. If I was enough, he would choose to stay. I told her that I understood that feeling better than I had ever wanted to. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She said, "You are more like me than you think, but you got out faster. That counts for something." I did not tell her that I had also been the woman who stood in a laundry room holding a grocery receipt and spent 3 more weeks inventing explanations. I did not say that, but I held it quietly and thought that maybe the difference between us was smaller than I had always wanted it to be, and that was okay. That was human. That was not failure. Dana got engaged in the spring. She asked me to be in her wedding, which is in August. I said yes immediately. She said she was worried about asking because she thought it might be hard for me, given everything. I told her, watching someone choose a person who deserves them is not hard for me. It is actually the thing I find most hopeful right now. I have started writing, not for anyone else, just for myself. Long, messy journal entries that nobody will ever read about what I thought marriage was supposed to be and what I had actually been inside of. About the particular loneliness of being deceived by someone you trusted completely. About the way I